Welcome everyone. My name's Jo Martin and I am the State Secretary of the Queensland Beekeepers Association. Just a little bit of housekeeping firstly, if you haven't already done so, if you can please just take your video off as possible. Otherwise I'll have to go through and disable. I just want to make sure that the bandwidth is sufficient so that we can reach everyone. We've got some great presentations that we're going to put up on screen today. I've got the entire team from the varroa mite prevention and preparedness team. Rob Stephen is their fearless leader, and this team have been going to great effort to keep Queensland obviously free from varroa in the initial incursion phase and eradication phase. And now that we're transferring more into the transition to management phase, the team's now stepping up with increased operational activities. And there's a lot going on in this space. So although it might seem a little bit quiet sometimes, there's a powerful lot going on. So please, if you've got some questions, we will have a short break in between the different segments that we're going to flesh through, because there is a fair bit of content we're going to cover today. But look, I'm going to hand straight over to Rob. Rob, thank you for making yourself available. For those wondering, Rob is located in Townsville and is in the direct line of the cyclone. So we're really fortunate that Rob has sought shelter, obviously, at this point in time prior to the destruction of the imminent cyclone, and he's joining us this afternoon. So we're really fortunate. Rob, I'm going to hand straight over to you and you can kick off.
Thanks very much, Jo. I'll swap this straight into presenter mode and hopefully this works for you all.
Looks great, Rob.
Okay, thanks again, Jo, and thanks very much to all the support we've had from QBA since this whole event started. So we are verging on 18 months now since this all kicked off in New South Wales in 2022. And I just want to acknowledge the tremendous support we've had from the Queensland beekeeping industry since that time. So before we get too far into it, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we meet today and pass my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on whose lands we work. So like I said, I'll try and cover off a few things today. I will talk fairly quickly. There's a lot of slides to get through and I want to give you all an opportunity to ask questions. We do know it's been quite a bit of time since you've had access to us. Unfortunately, just before Christmas, we had a few issues and we weren't able to present this before Christmas like we originally planned, but we will try and do this much more often and make sure that commercial beekeepers have access to our program at all times. So if you've ever got a question, by all means, just make contact with us. We'll make sure you've got our contact details throughout this presentation. So like I said, kicked off in June 2022. A couple of bee biosecurity officers in New South Wales were doing sentinel hive testing at the Port of Newcastle and found varroa on several hives. That kicked off the emergency response. So back then it was a 50-50 cost share response between government and industry parties. So that your industry, peak industry body is ARBIC, but there's also pollination reliant industries that are paying the bills on this response. So there's 15 separate pollination reliant industries that are all contributing to the varroa response down in New South Wales. And it's sort of important that you understand it's bigger than just the bee industry that is funding this response. So in July 2022, the National Management Group, or NMG, covered approved a national response plan, I should say, for the first 100 days of the response. And the consultative committee, which includes all those cost share partners, have been meeting ever since. So then that took us to December 2022, and the NMG subsequently endorsed a second response plan, and that was to cover us up until 30 June 2023. So you can see in the maps to the side that the situation was worsening in that time. Between July and December, the number of IPs in New South Wales was steadily increasing. So that brought us to, like I said, that response plan was only going to go to 30 June. So on the 27th of June, the National Management Group endorsed a new version of the response plan, version 3. And NMG and the CCEP, the Consultative Committee on Emergency Plant Pests, which is all those industry cost share partners, they agreed that varroa was still technically feasible and cost beneficial to eradicate. So NMG endorsed a revised response plan, but it did change in the background. So it swapped to 80-20 cost share. So that means 80% of the response is funded by government and 20% is funded by those industry cost share partners. So it was at that time that they did a efficiency audit down in New South Wales, and all the recommendations of that efficiency audit were incorporated into version 3 of the response plan. So at this point in time, around the end of June last year, there were about 174 infested premises or IPs in New South Wales, and it was still thought that that was containable and that technical feasibility of eradication was still possible. So that brings us to August and September of last year, and that's when everything changed. So that's when we discovered, I say we, I mean New South Wales, and I really want to acknowledge the tremendous job that the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries have been doing since this response kicked off. They had a monumental task ahead of them, and they were working furiously in the background to get this done. So there was a massive spike in Kempsey, and unfortunately, there was quite a lot of trace forwards from Kempsey. So I think we're up to 10 or 12 different IP locations around the state of New South Wales that were directly linked to Kempsey. So that increased the zone which was infested to over 16,000 square kilometres. And there was obviously tracing to the almonds, which was the doomsday scenario. It couldn't have played out worse if you had planned it, basically, that there were 4 separate almond pollination areas that were positive. And that was triggered multiple triggers within the response plan for review. So there were also new zones established in New South Wales. Thankfully, there still hasn't been a positive detection in New South Wales, but there were positive detections hasn't been any positive detections in Victoria, I should say. But there were positive detections in New South Wales that were within 25 kilometres. So there were surveillance emergency zones established in the state of Victoria, which included quite a few Queensland beekeepers that were tied up in that. We had over 10 to 15,000 Queensland hives that were in that surveillance zone inside Victoria. So by the 15th of September, the Consultative Committee met again, and it was agreed that the situation had gone past the point of no return, and that unfortunately varroa was no longer technically feasible to eradicate. So by that point, we had over 277 infested premises. So that's nearly an extra 100 to what I mentioned before at the end of June. So you can see all those areas highlighted in yellow that were directly linked to Kempsey. So north of Coffs Harbour, Somerton, Cutterbry, Barranald, Nericon, Eurely, and also there was a significant issue still brewing in the Sydney Basin. So we'll talk about that in a second, but that was always going to be a separate trigger of the response plan, just for the sheer number of recreational beekeepers that are in the Sydney Basin. So there's a variety of reasons why the response plan was deemed not technically feasible. Some of the major issues were non-compliance of New South Wales beekeepers to do their 16-week alcohol wash testing. We never really established a defined link. We still don't know how Kempsey became infested and how long it was infested for. So that's what led to all those trace forward detections, and that could well happen again. So they'd also lost a bit of what we call the social license, that was very hard to get the greater community on board when the infested area was just growing and growing, and also the amount of baiting that was happening on wild European honeybee hives. So that area that was infested, like I said before, had reached 16,000 square kilometres. So that was just growing a bigger and bigger task exponentially that required more staff and more resources that were going to be able to ever contain that threat. So that brought us to 19 September, when the National Management Group agreed upon CCEP's recommendation that eradication of varroa destructor in New South Wales is no longer technically feasible. So we're very frustrated by this, but there still isn't a approved national transition and management plan. So A revised response plan is currently being developed by New South Wales. That needs endorsement from the consultative committee, which includes all those industry cost share partners that I mentioned before. We've only got one shot at getting this right, so it is getting really finessed down to that finite detail to make sure that the transition management program is going to tick all these boxes for both your industry and for all the pollination reliant industries. So this has taken far longer than we ever expected. Unfortunately, the new version 4 of the response plan, including transition and management, wasn't approved before Christmas. And then the Christmas period has got in the way. So we're really hopeful that there might be approval of that plan in early to late February, but there's no guarantees with this. So that is the time frame we're working on. We're hoping for national endorsement of a new response plan and national approved transition and management program by mid-Feb to late Feb if everything goes to plan.
I think what's what's important for QBA to highlight is we really do share the frustration of everyone working within the operation to get consensus on an agreed plan to move forward. It is particularly frustrating for our sector, obviously being stalled and not really having too much transparency and light on where we're moving forward. But we know the team at ARBIC are really invested in making sure that the funds that are put forward are meaningful and give meaningful outcomes and practical outcomes to our beekeepers in Australia. So I would say to everyone, while we're all stalling in this space, please, think about what you can be proactively doing now. And the best thing that you can be doing is, looking for varroa mite now and getting that skill set that is, are going to be a founding part of caring for strong, healthy bees moving forward. If you're not looking for varroa mite, and more importantly, reporting that data into the computer, because the day that we get the phone call from the team at the department to say, yes, we've got an area, it's gone hot, we're going to measure the immediate distribution and potential spread on those figures that are provided by B123. The other thing to importantly remember is your record keeping. Make sure it's up to date now. Varroa is on, it is on its march here. It will be moved from beekeeper to beekeeper. It won't be moved from bees to bees. So, please make sure your records are all in order. But yeah, thanks, Rob, for raising that. Transition to management is it's fatiguing, it's wearing us all down, but we remain confident that the powers that be make some decisions very quickly and very effectively, and we can start rolling out the program on the ground that is going to really help industry moving forward. Thanks, Rob. Sorry, keep going.
And that's why we're here today. I just really want to reiterate to you guys that the Queensland department is going to progress with our own transition and management, whatever happens in New South Wales. So we're hoping to get some national funding. We're hoping to get national training packages going. We know that's not enough, though. We know that more work is going to be required to support this industry over the next couple of years. We will hopefully have more defined news on that in the very near future, where we can guarantee to you guys that we are here to stay and our program will be running into the future. Hopefully we'll have some more information on the specifics of what the New South Wales National Response Plan means as well once it is endorsed. But for today, we just mainly want to show you the framework of what we're trying to achieve with the transition and management program, and some of that detail will come later, but rest assured we are working on that detail in the background. So and we will share that information as soon as we're able to do so and when these plans are approved. So this is what New South Wales looks like now. I think you'll remember those maps that used to be the red and the blue zones. Now we've got two zones in New South Wales. You've got the management zone, which is basically the heavily infested zones at the time that it transitioned to management. So mid-September, that's basically the extent on the eastern seaboard where there was detections. They haven't decided to put management zones around those outlier detections, mainly because they were already on track to get early changed as surveillance zones anyway. So New South Wales had really done an amazing job on those outlier detections, and they were well and truly on track for those returning to business as usual within about a 12-month time frame. So we're fairly confident that there's no real mite loading in those outlier areas. The coast is a completely different scenario, though. So just to briefly touch on what the idea is with the National Management Plan. First things first, they have to ensure an orderly stand down of the response activities. So they're in an interim phase at the moment where they're going to transition to a formal transition to management program. They're not continuing with the eradication program. All hive destruction stopped back in November, December. All owner reimbursement costs are now done. So there's no more euthanisation of hives happening in New South Wales, and that isn't an option for beekeepers moving forward. So, and that's our goal, that we've got to move to business as usual and transitioning to a state where industry can deal with varroa. So the main thing for the program is slowing the spread. It's building that industry resilience to the pest and educating on providing management options. So that's IPM. You're going to hear a lot of this acronym over the next few years. That's going to be a major part of beekeeping, is IPM, Integrated Pest Management. You guys are going to be learning how to monitor, and once you reach a threshold, that's when you apply chemical treatment. So there's reasons why we don't have chemicals available in Queensland just yet. There is no evidence to suggest that varroa is here. We don't want to create issues that we don't need to prematurely, and that involves chemical resistance. And that's why we need people out there testing. It's not good enough for people to say, I'll start testing when it gets here. We're not going to know it's here unless everyone buys in and starts testing, and that's when those chemicals will be available to broader industry. So another big thing is obviously supporting pollination security. So as I've told you, there's multiple industries that are paying the bills on this program. They want some assurance that they're going to have hives available to them moving forward. So as of the 10th of January, we're up to 468 known IPs in New South Wales. That includes 57 that are inside that new SEZ. So it's not the surveillance emergency zone anymore. It's a suppression emergency zone. That's the green zone on the map. So that's pretty much everywhere in New South Wales outside those deep purple clusters. But I did want to have the little inset here to really highlight that the Sydney Basin is well and truly infested now. So you've got full encroachment all around CBD Sydney. There are multiple detections around the Sydney Basin. So even if the Kempsey situation hadn't eventuated, this was probably going to lead to the end of the response plan as we know it anyway, because of just the sheer number of hives in there. It's also into New National Park. The Blue Mountains are just on the edge of that infested area as well, which was going to pose significant issues to the wild honeybee eradication program. So look, I won't get bogged down in this, but I would suggest that I'll get Tanya to share a link in the chat. And I really encourage you guys to stay abreast with the situation in New South Wales. It's a really good source of information to know the heat mapping and see where those zones are, and to see what's going on with chemical registrations. So I won't go into all the detail of what's required in each zone in New South Wales, but we are considering very similar restrictions here in Queensland once we become a combat jurisdiction and we have varroa in place as well. So we plan on slowing the spread, but once it gets here, we need to move into that business as usual as quickly as possible so we're not restricting your industry. So that's probably a good time to have a quick break. That's the New South Wales situation as it stands. Is there any questions on that and what's going on nationally?
Just wait for everyone for a moment.
I'll give you a minute. Nothing in the chat though.
No, nothing in the chat at the moment, Rob. There's nothing else in the Q&A. Look, I think for beekeepers, as we're just opening up for some questions, beekeepers, there's a lot of point of truth in information sources that are out there at the moment, and I would definitely urge you to make sure that whatever you're hearing on the front of varroa is as close to the point of truth as possible. I have heard no end of Chinese whispers and some of the craziest whispers over the course of this program. So I definitely say to people, please make sure wherever you are sourcing your information from, make sure it's a point of truth. So your point of truth here in Queensland is definitely the QBA. We have our very own QBA members Varroa Mite portal. It is a timeline of history of every update. I think I'm up to update 122 to QBA members. I punched them out. I was punching them out on a weekly basis. I've now shifted to a fortnightly basis on those ones. But where we do have new information, I will prioritise that and quite often pop that up there for you. So, you can even subscribe to that. So you've got a regular mail feed coming through. Your other source for the point of truth is, of course, ARBIC. So if you're not already subscribed to their emails, please get onto their emails. Make sure you've got them feeding into your inbox. Consider making a donation to ARBIC as well. The industry bodies, we are doing a massive volume of work here in Queensland. The QBA's protecting, our 400 members, but also 10,130 beekeepers and 162,000 honeybee hives in Queensland. We're the representative body and the voice for beekeeping in Queensland. So please be very mindful that we are carrying a very, very heavy burden and an increasing workload. So if you've got a couple of dollars, I know the cost of living crisis is impacting everyone, but please find a means to support your state industry body, your national industry body, because we're here for the long run. We're not going anywhere too soon. I don't think there's any questions there, Rob. I've just been waiting. There's no raise of hands, so let's kick on with the Queensland response.
We'll keep on going then. I just want to really, again, highlight the effort that the Queensland government has put in since day one. We stood up a virtual control centre virtually the day after the detection in New South Wales, and we've been working with QBA ever since, and working with ARBIC and working with all these industry parties. So at the moment, it's been delivered in 3 phases. You could nearly say 4 phases now. So we started the varroa mite state control centre. We had over 100 staff contributing that over a 7-8 week period. Then we moved into a more permanent footing with a varroa preparedness working group. And then in December of last year, December of 2022 now, we moved into the varroa mite prevention and preparedness program. So obviously, since September, our scope has changed. We're probably not going to rebadge. We'll probably still remain the varroa mite prevention and preparedness program, but obviously our attention is more away from prevention and more to preparedness, because whether you like it or not, varroa is coming. It's just a matter of time. So in recognition of this evolving situation, we secured $1.8 million of funding through Treasury to support activities over a 2-year period. That takes us to 30 June this year. And like I said before, we're in the process of getting funding approval to move this program into the future. So to date, there is no evidence of varroa mite in Queensland, and we plan on keeping it that way a little bit longer. Look, we know varroa is coming. We're not trying to restrict you guys and trying to be delusional that we're going to keep it out forever. We just want to buy a little bit more time. Some of those chemical registrations aren't quite sorted yet. The national program isn't endorsed. Some of that national training hasn't rolled out. We just want to buy a little bit more time so beekeepers can be better prepared for when this change happens, because it's going to be the biggest change beekeepers have ever had in Australia, and there'll be no turning back. So we've got one shot at this. We want to make sure we buy ourselves enough time to do it properly. So, look, I'll move on pretty quickly through this, but this is our current structure of the program. So I lead the program from here in Townsville. We got half an FTE or a full-time equivalent in community engagement. We've got a principal policy officer, Tanya, who's here to answer questions today. We've got our permitting officer, Dean Stephen, who's also here. And we've got 2 operational staff, and Patricia Swift and Mark Kruck. Mark's here today to answer questions as well. We've got our administration officer, Tracy, and we've also got temporarily a senior project officer in Dave Shapalius. So as you all know, Dave was in our BBO position, our bee biosecurity officer. It's really unfortunate timing that contract ended. This isn't unique to Queensland. All the states are suffering the same issue. We are in the process of finalising a new bee biosecurity officer program with Plant Health Australia. We expect that to be signed off in the coming weeks, and we hope to recruit that position. But we realised we couldn't have that position empty, so we've brought Dave back into the program until that BBO officer is sorted. Now, some of the activities we've been doing is everything is up until now has mainly been based around keeping varroa out. So a lot of the work we do is around movement control. That's going to be a big job moving forward as well, because we know the Queensland beekeeping industry needs access to interstate movement. It's a highly migratory industry. We can't keep restricting your businesses indefinitely. So we need to have sensible movement moving forward. So I'll go into a bit more detail on that a little bit later, but this is some of the other work we've been doing, is just that comms material, surveillance and tracing, industry liaison, public reporting, building up those systems in the background, increasing our mapping capability, and really working with the industry to see what those needs are moving forward. So obviously we've resigned to the fact that Queensland has to join other restrictions in transferring from eradication to management of varroa mite. We're free at the moment, but we're not going to stay that way forever. So unfortunately, when that transition of management was announced, we put a pause on the issuance of permits for movements of beehives and bee-related material from New South Wales. We were happy to say that we were able to facilitate movement of equipment for irradiation late last year. And I'm happy to announce that as of today, effectively, full supers can now start to return from Queensland from the New South Wales suppression zone. So we know some beekeepers are still trapped down in New South Wales. We want to make sensible movement possible again. So we're going to ensure that those supers can move from New South Wales to Queensland for extraction, and then they can go back. Watch this space. We're hopeful by the end of next week. I don't want to overcommit, but in the coming weeks, we'll also start to free up other equipment movements as well. So that'll free up for empty supers if people have that kind of business model at the moment where they've got to extract in New South Wales, and just other equipment outside of radiation. Any low risk movements, we just want to make sure that they start moving. So one thing I also really want to reiterate with industry is that it's inevitable we're going to get detections. We want to remove the stigma away from it. Someone's got to be the first one that gets it. We need people to be contributing. We need early detection. That's going to help us make decisions that are going to help your industry. So we're not anticipating any broad scale eradication or containment activities. There's always going to be exceptions. Like if someone does the wrong thing and they're moving prohibited matter, which varroa is illegally, we're going to reserve the right to enforce our full capability. But in general, if beekeepers haven't done anything wrong and there's been natural spread from New South Wales or an open pathway, we have no plans on restricting your business. We obviously might put a temporary pause for a few days that we can do tracing investigations. We just need to establish how varroa got here quickly, figure out if it is an open pathway, figure out if it's some sort of illegal movement, and then work with industry to make sure that we're moving forward into that business as usual model, that we have no plans on restricting industry just for the sake of restricting industry. There's got to be a benefit to it. So one scenario, just for an example, if we got a detection on recreational hives very close to the border, there could be some value in establishing a small movement control area and keeping commercial beekeepers out of it. And then that might buy us just a little bit more time. We wouldn't be eradicating any hives in that zone. Recreational beekeepers aren't usually moving around in that zone. It would just be, again, to buy commercial industry that little additional time. So like Joe mentioned before, records. We need beekeepers to all be doing the right thing and keeping accurate records, because when we do get that first detection in Queensland, we will be seeking records from you and we will be trying to establish how varroa got here. That should be a relatively quick and pain-free process, especially if you've kept your records up to date. So obviously to support industry, we're going to continue engagement with all our stakeholders. That's why we're here today. That's why we've got Dave in that temporary role. It wasn't great timing around Christmas time. A lot of the beekeeping groups don't really have much formal meetings. I know that's starting to kick off now. You will start to see our program and our staff at all your future meetings, and we plan to be available for you guys to answer any questions you might have moving forward on varroa. So another thing I really want to highlight is we're out there testing hives. Now, since that transition to management, we've tested, well, as of last week, it was 935. We haven't got this week's stats in there yet, but we've tested over 1,000 hives with miticide. So we're out there, we're testing hives in the key locations, any tracing links to New South Wales, and that's giving us a much better negative assessment than what an alcohol wash would. So I hear a lot of stories from beekeepers about potential risk pathways. If you've got any information and you've got legitimate concerns that some areas might have links to New South Wales and varroa could be there, make contact with us and we will get in there and we will do the testing, because we need to know where varroa is. So if you've got any information at all, contact us and we will direct surveillance activities towards those areas. So anyone that wishes to participate, I'll just get Tanya to chuck our email address in the chat. It's just varroa@daf.qld.gov.au. If you would actively like to participate in miticide testing on your hives, by all means, make contact with us. And we are anticipating to start stepping up significantly testing around late February, early March again. We've got a few other things on the boil at the moment in late January, early Feb, but we're really looking to start establishing some long-term testing of some hives moving forward. And this gives us better idea that varroa isn't here yet. If it is here, we'll deal with it. There's no stigma attached to it. We need to know when varroa has entered Queensland so we can make accurate decisions and informed decisions. So just briefly want to outline, our framework is very similar to that of New South Wales. Our priorities for our Queensland is going to very much marry up with the New South Wales program. Our aim is to minimise the impact of varroa mite in Queensland honeybee and pollination reliant industries. And we're trying to transition to a state where varroa is manageable moving forward, because we've got to get back to that business as usual. So our key goals and objectives are going to be reducing the risk of varroa mite transmission, enhancing bee biosecurity and business resilience, enhancing stakeholder capacity and teaching integrated pest management principles, including education on chemical control options, and again, that pollination security. We don't have the same drivers as other states with the almonds, but we do have industries that are very important cost share partners and require pollination. For example, we have the macadamias, avocados, mangoes. All these industries are going to want security moving forward, that they've got access to hives. So a big part of our program will be enabling education and training for Queensland beekeepers by providing that up-to-date management advice. A lot of this will be based on New South Wales. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We're not out there creating content that's already been created by New South Wales. We'll get onto that hopefully in a future Toolbox talk, and we'll be able to say what some of that New South Wales resourcing will lead to. But rest assured that that's what our plan is, to really roll out that New South Wales content as well as value add to that and have Queensland specific content as well. So Queensland's going to have some unique problems that probably aren't as big an issue in New South Wales. We're a much larger state. We've got much broader geographical climatic conditions, small hive beetle interactions. We're going to have issues that other states don't have, and we're going to have to navigate that as we progress. So just really quickly, a snapshot. Joe mentioned before that the sort of the main number, but beekeeping registrations are still going up in Queensland. We cracked 10,000 just before Christmas. We've got another 100 or so since then. So we've got over 162,000 registered hives in Queensland. So a couple of key stats in that though, nearly 75% of Queensland beekeepers only have 5 hives or less. So 3/4 of all beekeepers are recreational. But the big end of town, 4% of Queensland beekeepers own 75% of the hives. So obviously that's going to be our starting point. That is the key pathway for us, that we need to educate these beekeepers and then start working our way down. But make no mistake, those 10,000 beekeepers all need education, because they're your neighbours. They're going to have bees in proximity to your bees. So we need to make sure that all those 10,000 registered beekeepers have enough understanding that they're not posing risk to people that are doing the right thing. So just a snapshot. This isn't by any means a fully up-to-date map, but just broadly showing you hives are based on population. Basically, wherever people live, there are hives. So that's something that we're planning our resourcing around that sort of distribution of hives in Queensland.
And I think just importantly, that map that Rob's just put up on the screen, that is reflecting the location of the RBE entity itself. So often that is your home address. That does not illustrate the distribution of hives throughout Queensland. But you know, we secured some interesting information last week, and it's suggesting that more than 65% of the state's beekeepers live within 380 kilometres of each other. We're talking between Bundaberg and the Coolangatta border. That is where more than 85% of the state's beehives are being managed from. That is your point of control. That is your home base. That is your extracting shed and your operations. So, you know, please appreciate that that distance between Bundaberg and the Coolangatta border is the equivalent exactly at this point in time between Coffs Harbour and the lower edge of the Sydney Basin. We're talking about real figures and real spread of varroa. And, once this thing comes in, if you're not looking for it, it is going to spread like the wildfire. So we need people actively getting in there, and please look for it. I can't stress it enough.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to move through that sector very fast because of the nature of the industry. So the highly migratory nature of the industry creates risk, and we know varroa is going to spread very quickly through that area because we won't be eradicating, basically. So that we're not going to do what New South Wales did. We're going to slow it where we can, but we don't want to impinge on your businesses where we don't have to. So just want to reiterate that the zone system is still in place. So Queensland as a whole is a biosecurity zone. So you cannot introduce bees from a state that has varroa. So at the moment, that is only New South Wales. That could change in the future, though. So I fully expect by the time the almond the almond pollination season is finished, that Victoria is probably next in line. Queensland is next after that. Queensland is third in line to be a combat jurisdiction. I suspect Victoria will go fast, but that could change. So at the moment, you will require a permit to return from a state that has varroa. So at the moment, there is nothing stopping you going to Victoria and South Australia. You are free to move to those jurisdictions and back again. You only need to require a permit from us if you are returning from a state where varroa has been found. So we also cleaned up some of the simple stuff long ago that you can move new equipment and processed honey and that kind of thing. There's no restrictions on movement from that, even from New South Wales. So look, I'll try and move this fairly quickly, but there has been significant work in movement control since day one. The first movement control orders was in June 2022. We had additional changes up till September. The first almond pollination since varroa occurred. We've had interstate working groups where we try and harmonise those. Look, we know how frustrating it is for Queensland beekeepers who have to cross multiple jurisdictions and navigate all the different rules. Where possible, we try and harmonise with the other jurisdictions to make this as simple as possible. And that's where we're moving going forward. We want to eliminate the permit system. There will be unified movement control, but some of it might just be a bit staggered. Each state is its own sovereignty. They might have their own priorities just until they become combat jurisdictions. But the end game is, again, business as usual. You'll hear me saying that all the time. We've got to get to the point where you guys can operate and you're not being restricted because of varroa. But unfortunately, there is going to be a stagger because every state is going to be on a different timeline when they go hot. So there was also that situation last year with the movement control order for Victorian hives. And we had originally the border shut with the Tari situation, which seems like a lifetime ago now, but we have had full hives come from New South Wales at different times as of last year. So we haven't had much permit activity since Christmas, but since the permit system came into place, we've had 65 permits issued for irradiation, 44 for empty supers, 36 for full supers. Live bees, we've issued 67 permits. So that's over 35,000 hives we've facilitated coming from New South Wales. And look, we're confident we haven't introduced varroa with those movements. So that's what I was talking about before. We can have sensible movement that can allow live bees to move, and we can manage that risk. So we haven't had the opportunity with Queens, but that is going to be very high on our radar moving forward. We know that we need to get those genetics moving again. We know we need to get high value Queens moving from New South Wales. That is very much on the radar moving forward. So just to put that spatially so you guys can see it, that's where all those permits have originated from. The orange ones are irradiation, the green ones are live bees. So all those movements have occurred, and we're confident they've been done safely moving forward. So while I'm on permits, though, it's a really important time to remind people that if we issue you a permit, you are legally obligated to follow the conditions of that permit. So look, the situation in Victoria was a very dynamic situation and very fluid. We did have to adapt very quickly. We did put some extra conditions in place that weren't on our standard permits for moving bees. And look, we realised some of those conditions were probably not manageable moving forward in a post-transition management world. So we did send out a notification to all Queensland beekeepers that had a that had a biosecurity instrument permit, that we absolved them of their condition 17, which required them to report any subsequent movements. Now, that did not absolve you of your other requirements. Every beekeeper that returned from Victoria is obligated to test their hives every 16 weeks. That is for the next 12 months. You're obligated to keep records. You just aren't obligated to notify us of every movement. So it's important that this isn't just a tick and flick exercise for Queensland beekeepers, that you get a permit and then you just file it away in your inbox. You are legally obliged to follow the conditions of that permit, and we need buy-in. If we don't have Queensland beekeepers adhering to their permit conditions, it makes it very hard for us to justify increased movement. So if we're trying to facilitate movement to almonds this year, we need to make sure that the current cohort of beekeepers that have been issued permits are doing the right thing. So again, we've mentioned record keeping before, but it's of the utmost importance that if you guys get a detection, we need to assess the risk. Your conditions are broke up into three categories. You've got obligations prior to movement, you've got obligations during movement, and you've got obligations post-arrival. So once you get into Queensland, it's vitally important that Queensland beekeepers are adhering to these conditions, or we just can't facilitate movement moving forward. So again, just to formalise that, it is an offence under the Biosecurity Act to not adhere to a biosecurity instrument permit when it's been issued. So that the maximum penalty for that offence is up to 2,000 penalty units or up to a year in prison. So a penalty unit at the moment is about $154. So that equates to a $315,000 fine if you're not adhering to your conditions. And I should also reiterate that most commercial beekeepers are exactly that, they're businesses. So the penalty units increase for businesses as they do for individuals. So it's also offence to not have your records on you when you're in transit with that movement condition. Now, that's as simple as having a phone that has email on it. So that is significantly easier than what it used to be. You don't need a printout of that permit, but you do need to have an approved permit to be transiting through New South Wales. And again, that's 100 penalty units. And look, we also have penalty infringement notice options there where we can give on-the-spot fines for people that aren't keeping accurate records for that movement. But I won't get too bogged down in that, but it's just really, really important for us moving forward. If beekeepers want things to open up, we need beekeepers to be adhering to the conditions of their permit. It's not just you get a permit and you can file that away. You're legally obligated to follow these conditions. So that's probably a good time to stop again and see if there's any questions on any of the Queensland approach so far or any of the permitting information.
Yeah, look, we've got 16 people in at the moment. There's a few familiar faces to me. Does anyone have any questions at all? Otherwise, we will keep moving forward. But there's, these toolbox talks are, they're designed, and we've scoped them out to make sure that they're as inclusive as possible, and it gives our members the means to have a direct conversation and interaction with the team who are operationally responsible for this transition to management program. These guys are the nuts and bolts of everything, and they're doing a tremendous job. But this is a time for feedback to be provided ultimately. Any suggestions, or if there is something that you're conscious of, that you're thinking of, that's coming up, that's a priority for you, it may well be a priority for others. Now's your platform to raise that up. You can always raise it through me, and I have very regular conversations with Rob and the entire team. This is a large focus of the priority of the work of the QBA at the moment, and is taking up significant volumes of my time and the board's time. Any questions? John, with the IPM, we are looking at, I beg your pardon, I'll just quickly flash that up again. Thanks, John. Look, I can put you on live if you like as well. Is that easier to unmute you? Would you like to do that? Okay. John, I'm just going to come in here and just see if I can unmute you from my end. Okay, so are you there, John? Potentially the floor's open for you. You just need to unmute from your end as well. No? Okay, so John's question was, with the IPM, we are looking at non-chemical interventions. So I'm a little bit confused about that one there. The IPM model has got a few different levels of interventions, obviously, as well.
Yeah. So yeah, that is going to be what IPM is all about. It's about monitoring. It's about finding that threshold. And look, I've got a slide on this coming up, but seeing you've asked a question, I'll give you a brief summary of it. It's really important that beekeepers understand what's going on with chemical management, because this is something Queensland beekeepers haven't had to deal with in the past. They haven't kept accurate records. This is going to be a big thing. All Queensland beekeepers will have to keep records. John, you there now? Have we got the gist of the question, or is there more to it?
Well, no, my thoughts were: are we also looking at things like drone removal? I mean, you hear an awful lot about chemicals, but
Yes.
coming from like the UK, I mean, I unfortunately had to deal with varroa for many years there, but we actually moved beyond chemicals, and we moved towards certain times of the year. I could manage the hive. I could do a shuck swarm. I could do various management programs. And all I'm suggesting is that, or at least I'm encouraging, is that we trial some of these alternative approach, primarily to maintain the excellent health benefits of honey. I don't want to,
No, look, that's John. You bang on the point there. The whole model of integrated pest management is going to be, about using different applications, both environmental and chemical, to make sure that you've got the means to keep those mite thresholds down. That may be using things like drone comb at the moment to try and draw and lure. But I think what we've got to all understand is that will not be the silver bullet, and we've got to be very, very mindful. So yes, there are some more organic alternatives that beekeepers can employ, but good beekeepers, and dare I say, I'm going to be blunt here, beekeepers that want to survive, moving forward, must be open-minded to, what they've got available. So the immediate point in time, yes, there's a big body of work going on with regards to getting some chemicals approved through the APVMA, but more importantly, this is where we're all reflecting back to, and it does come down to those fundamentals of putting those practices into play at the moment. Might not have to be using miticides, obviously at the moment, until you find that first mite in your colonies. But for the first and foremost, do those applications that you need to in the field, so that you've got a practice in play. It's a skill set. You're going to have to add that in every couple of minutes to a hive to make sure that you're getting those thresholds and you're understanding what this practice is all about. But yeah, I think definitely I know, and I am confident a large body of that work that's being produced for the National Management Plan pathways is definitely focused around multiple disciplines with regards to managing varroa in your hive. So, John, that's a really, really good point to make. Definitely, nothing's out of question. What we would steer people against is considering any chemicals or any products off-label use. There are strict penalties and fines involved in that. Not only can they be harmful to your bees if you don't know what you're doing, they can be harmful to yourself as well. So, just make sure that you're informing yourself with that point of truth information. And like I said, ARBIC's a great place. But John, I hope that we're going to see some of those published pieces of education coming out very, very soon. I am, very keen to be a part of that. I've even put my hand up to make sure that, the QBA executive team do have the opportunity to complete these courses and undertake them. So we're building skill set internally as well. But, I might just add to that. I had my first experience of doing high level miticide surveillance on Monday. Yes, your state secretary went out in 42-degree heat. She was walking through a paddock that the grass has obviously very quickly grown in the last few weeks. But that was my big dose of reality. For a long time, I've been thinking, we've got this. My mind shifted immediately upon learning of the news of the transition to management. For that But that was my real dose of reality on Monday. And that's the new normal. I'm going to be pushing out photos from that exercise. And definitely the beekeepers that are joining up to that early intervention program and doing that high level miticide surveillance, you've got to think of it in two means. Number one, you're removing your need to have to alcohol wash that load. So that's your first thing. It's so much easier to run that through, lift a couple of boxes, you can leave your supers on. The team come in on day one, and on day three, they come back out. Those strips come out, the mats go off to the lab, and you've got very high level surveillance that's being operated on your hive. The second thing is you're getting exposure to those chemicals and this new mechanism of looking after your hives moving forward. So if you want to have the competitive edge around the rest of them, perfect time to put your hands up. If by consequence we do find a detection in the hives, it's okay, it's going to be fine. We will work through. The QBA is not going to be lobbying for really fast and hard and controls that are going to restrict people's ability to move about and keep their hives. We appreciate that we've got to rip this band-aid off and get going with it when we find it in Queensland. So I really can't stress enough, being a part of that program. Your information is treated very sensitively. You don't need to broadcast that you're a part of it. But if we did happen to find something, there's a means there to manage this. There's probably a very small stop work associated with that activity. If you've got your records in check, and you've got nothing to hide, then let's get on with it. Let's move on. Right, Rob, I'll go back there. Oh, Rick has got a question. Come on in, Rick. Is your microphone ready?
Yep. Good afternoon, all. Now, Joe, you just mentioned that if there was any found in Queensland,
yes,
we want to rip the band-aid off. Rob, what is your stand on that? There's going to be a lot of push on restriction of movement if it's found, to restrict it to where it's found. I would understand, and that was what previous had been said. Is that changed, or is it still?
Would you like me to clarify first of all, Rick, when I say that, when I use the terminology rip the band-aid off?
Yeah.
Rip the band-aid off.
Yeah,
rip the band-aid off. It means that there's a dedicated, that beekeeper has miticide provided to him that is inserted into all of his hives immediately. So he undertakes treatment immediately in all of those hives. Quite possible, because of cross-contamination of loads, he may need to start treating other loads within the apiary that he's running, his complete apiary. From there moving forward, we can expect the generalised suppression zone is exactly what Rob has been talking about. A suppression zone in materialising fact of a transition to management is those beekeepers having access to the chemical treatments so that they all go out and are actively looking for varroa. And as soon as they get varroa, we're issuing them with treatment strips. Am I correct, Rob?
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to cover before. We don't anticipate that we're going to have broad scale movement control. There will be some instances where it might make sense. Like I said before, if we've got a detection near the border in recreational industry and we're going to stop commercial beekeepers from going in there. If it's an open pathway though, and it's got through natural spread, we don't intend on restricting, because it's going to get here. There's no benefit to industry in restricting that. Like Joe said, we will be the chemical distributor in the first instance. Queensland, as us as Biosecurity Queensland, is stockpiling chemical so that we can provide enough for the worst case scenario, that if 10,000 hives need treated in very quick succession, we can distribute those chemicals at our cost to industry, while Queensland swaps to look. I won't go into all the detail, but Queensland doesn't intend to be on the New South Wales limited use permit just yet, because we don't have varroa. We don't want people preemptively treating for varroa. So that will just lead to resistance problems. So we want to have control of that. We will be the distributor of the chemical in the first instance. We can transition to that permit very, very quickly. And we have been working with industry on chemical supply lines, and we're confident that you'll be commercially available to get chemical through places like Elders very, very quickly once we push that button, but we will keep enough in stock that we can cover that in the first instance. But we don't see any benefit in restricting industry if it doesn't serve a purpose. So we will maybe have some localized control, like a biosecurity order, just while that tracing is done. There may be a movement control order in some border zones on recreational beekeepers if it serves a purpose. But if once it's in commercial industry, it's probably already running. So we're not going to make one beekeeper pay the price when it's already out there. So we're past that point now. We need to work with industry. We need to remove the stigma from it. We need to know where it is. We need beekeepers working with us, and so we know accurately where varroa is and how we can slow the spread, because that's what we're trying to do. That's our objective. We're trying to slow it. We're not trying to eradicate it. If it doesn't serve a purpose, we won't do it. So yeah,
Thanks
just
for that,
Do you
quickly.
have enough?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks for that, Rob. Just remember them chemicals have a use by on them.
Yep, we have gone through that. We've got multiple years. We've got 3-year expiry date. We've also got a commercial, hopefully agreement with Ecritech coming that we can rotate that chemical anyway. We can store it down there, and so these things. Yep, we fully acknowledge there's issues there, and we'll work with them going forward. Just to go back on John's question before, I'm only scratching the surface of what IPM is. There will be whole 2-day workshops on the IPM for Queensland beekeepers. That's how important it is. This is part of the New South Wales program. I'm not trying to tell you all elements of IPM today, just introduce the concept. But yeah, John is completely right. There are mechanical means to control, but it's the scale that's the issue. And also it's our climatic conditions. We don't get those brood breaks in Queensland. So that's what John's talking about, forcing that brood break. It's not easy though. And Queensland, we're not going to be able to model ourselves on what's happening in New Zealand. They get that brood break. They only treat once a year. I'm not going to lie to you. I anticipate Queensland beekeepers are probably going to have to treat 3 times a year. And that's going to be the new normal. So that's why we're trying to buy some time, because that is a huge transition for beekeepers to suddenly move into treating 3 times a year. There might be some prophylactic treatment as well, that there might be, for pollination contracts to occur, you might need to have chemical in place. These are some of the decisions that will be made at that national level for things like almonds to control the spread. You might be putting chemical in pre-almond. So these are some of the things that we will nut out the detail a little bit later. Today is just to scratch the surface and tell you what IPM is and what kind of things we're going to be covering.
Yeah. So I noticed you've got a nasty little brawler fly on there as well, Rob. Notifiable pest at the moment. Hopefully everyone's having a little bit of a look for those as well. Those little critters are potentially out there.
This isn't all to scale, but these are the things you're going to encounter. Like, I think a lot of beekeepers might understand the concept of alcohol washing, but how well are people really doing it? So these are all things you would expect to see. Well, hopefully not the bottom one. That's a triple A lapse in mite. Hopefully that's not going to be around for a while yet. But on the right is varroa. Up top is Brilla fly, which is in New South Wales, in Victoria and Tasmania now. And that's pollen mite over to the left. Now, that's not to scale. They are significantly smaller. But it's so important if you guys are doing your testing, you're not going to see this with the naked eye. That's what the alcohol wash is about. You need to do it through that filter. You need to see it sticking out on white filter paper. You're not going to see varroa in your hives. Like the amount of beekeepers that say they'll know it when they see it. If you can see varroa crawling in your hive, it is far too late. Your hive will be dead very, very quickly if you're seeing varroa crawling around. So I'm conscious of the time. I talk way too long, but just quickly what varroa is, it's only 1.5 mils. This is why the drone uncapping is really useful tool, because it sticks out so obviously. When you've got a mite on that drone brood, a lot of beekeepers aren't too worried about losing some drone. It is a really effective way of presence absence testing, and opportunistically, when you've got drone brood available, using an uncapper, a scratcher, and just getting a sample, because that's where the mite want to be. They want to be in your drone brood. It's a really simple test and it gives you an instant result. So I don't want to scare you, but varroa spreads by everything. Basically, robbing, drifting, mingling, people movement, bee movement, you name it. Anything you do with beekeeping is how varroa spreads, and that's exactly how we got to this point. So just quickly, you do have a general biosecurity obligation in Queensland. We don't expect you to know every thread out there, but no one can say they don't know about varroa now. Varroa has been in the headlines for long enough. it will be expected that beekeepers are treating for varroa when they get it. You need to understand the risk and you need to be appropriately acting. So your GBO, your general biosecurity obligation, you're required to register as a beekeeper. You should be testing your hive at least 3 times a year. You do have to report. We mentioned that it is a notifiable incident to have broiler fly or bee louse, and varroa is still prohibited matter. So you are required to report it. So you want to make sure you're practicing come clean, go clean, know where you're buying your equipment for, having barrier systems in place where possible, and keeping those records. So mentioned before, and hopefully we put the link in the chat, ARBIC is a really good source of information on where some of these chemical registrations currently sits. So it will be part of your general biosecurity obligation once varroa is here to be following IPM practices. You won't be able to plead ignorant and say, I didn't know. When varroa is here, the expectation is you're monitoring and you are treating when you reach those thresholds. So once you've got 3 to 5 mites, you are required under your general biosecurity obligation to be treating them. So over to the right is some of those chemical registrations. There's going to be a mix. You want to rotate between chemical classes. We do have some obstacles here in Queensland, though. Some of these chemicals aren't great in our temperature range, and this is exactly why we don't want resistance problems. This is why we don't want open slather on chemical use in Queensland just yet, because once we have resistance, we have very limited options in terms of temperature range and what chemical classes we can use. So mentioned before, every time you hear me talk, I'll mention B123 in public reporting. We need to know what the problem is before we can do anything about it. We need an accurate idea of where the hives are. In any 16-week period, we're trying to really promote to have up to 15,000 hives across 500 apiaries tested. So that's not a huge amount. If just 5% of industry was testing on a regular basis, we would blow that out of the water. We have 10,000 registered beekeepers. If all of them tested 3 times a year, that would be more than enough to cover. Look, we're not trying to prove freedom indefinitely, but we do want to know where varroa is. There is a distinction between surveillance and monitoring. So we're still encouraging when people are doing that testing, they're still testing at the approved levels that we have talked about in the past. They're testing 50 hives. Once you move to full-blown integrated pest management and varroa is endemic, it'll be a much smaller cohort of hives. You'll only be doing 10 hives on a regular basis. But right now, we're still trying to prove it's not here or have an accurate idea. So we're still promoting those good old numbers where you're testing about 50 hives out of a load of 120. If you've got less than 30 hives, you should be testing all of them. So B123, we'll put the link in the chat as well. The QR code is on the screen. Hopefully by now, surely everyone knows about B123. It's vitally important. If you've got any problems, I know there has been a few issues with it. Use that email address. We know it can be frustrated to go through the call center. You've got a direct line with that varroa@DAF email address. One of our team will input the data for you if it's a problem. So by all means,
I will input the data for you. I have done it before.
It's just so important. So we'll put that link in the chat. I do need to keep moving. We will do another testing blitz campaign where you'll see the ads on social media, you'll hear the ads on radio, and you'll hopefully no beekeeper will be able to say they didn't know they should be out there testing. Some of our past results, in autumn we had a blitz. This was fairly successful. We came just short of that 500 apiary target. We had 455 apiaries tested. We had 11,000 hives completed. That was between 1 April and towards the end of July last year. So we were really happy with that. But unfortunately, we thought spring should be an even better time to test, but the numbers went significantly down. So we only had about 326 submissions. But importantly, we had half the amount of hives that were actually checked. Credit where credit's due, though, people are doing the right kind of testing. So in early days of response, everyone wanted to do sugar shakes. We understand that. People have to build confidence. But the alcohol wash is a much more sensitive test. So nowadays, you can see from that chart, everything in blue is the testing we want. So we've got over 70% of beekeepers are doing alcohol wash and drone uncapping, which is exactly what we want. You've only got 6% of people are doing, if you include the others, rounded up to 10%, we're doing sugar shakes. And look, if people want to build that confidence, that's fine. But we need to make sure that beekeepers understand that alcohol wash is where it's at. That is your minimum standard for testing. Overall, we've had over 1,400. We should crack 1,500 submissions by next week if we're lucky. So just putting that out there, though, for 10,000 registered beekeepers, that's still not quite good enough. We've only got 400 beekeepers that are regularly contributing. We need to increase that number. Commercial beekeepers, I don't know if you remember that graph, but we probably only have about 300-400 that actually have over 50 hives, which we consider commercial, but over 780 people register in our database as commercial, but only 100 of those have submitted. So we're only looking at, 100 out of 700 commercial beekeepers are contributing, 400 beekeepers out of 10,000. So these numbers need to vastly improve if we want to have any accurate idea of what's going on. Just to show you more broadly over the course of the response, obviously early days, everyone was worried. We had significant spike in testing. And then you see towards the end of the graph, we had those testing, that advertising we were doing. So you can see spikes in autumn and you can see spikes in spring. There was obviously a massive lull in the Christmas period. That's to be expected. You can see we're getting that bounce back now, but we really want to see that spike continue. I'd really want to get that line up over 100 and keep it over 100. I really don't want to see under 100 submissions. No, a month. A week could be even better, but I'll start with a month. 100 submissions I don't think is a lot to ask. We need to get it back over that level and start there, and then really be increasing. So a 16-week period is roughly 4 months. You're not really going to be testing during the winter period. We advocate for autumn, spring and summer is when you should be in there and really testing your hives. So just quickly, we are doing other work here in the department. We've got the National Bee Pest Surveillance Program that does the work at all those the major ports around Queensland. We've got the National Bee Biosecurity Officer Program, which should be finalised with Plant Health Australia in the coming weeks, and we'll have that officer back on board. We have started work on Purple Hive project at some of these other ports. Look, we know that's not going to be a solution long term because eventually you're going to have endemic population of mites. But we are working with the people at Bega and Vimana who developed the Purple Hive, and they're actually trying to take that to the next level and work and have options for commercial beekeepers and having sensors in hives that can really give something to industry. We're also working with environmental DNA on other pests like tropicolaps, like Asian honeybees, varroa jacobsoni, making sure those things aren't introduced. We're going to establish sentinel hives like we do at the ports at border locations. So sentinel hives are just static locations where we test regularly on a 6-weekly basis. So that's going to pick up things like large African hive beetle, brilla fly, and external mites like varroa and tropicolaps. So we use those acaricides on a 6-weekly basis. So to start with, we're really looking to have the Gold Coast as a priority. We want to start finding some of these sites that are in close proximity to the border. At the moment, with commercial movement not coming from New South Wales, we think natural spread is the likely pathway. We want to be regularly testing in these zones. Now, that's going to be shortly followed from other locations around Stanthorpe and Warwick, around apple pollination areas there. I really believe that's the most likely pathway that we're going to get varroa into Queensland. Look, things can change after that movement really frees up. So really important, if you've got hives in any border locations, if you're collecting swarms, you should be having that barrier system in place. You should be testing any swarm you collect before you go and introduce it to your apiary, because you're just introducing risk. So you should be proportionally testing an alcohol wash on any swarm you collect before you introduce it to your main site. So, and input that data into B123. There's a specific question there about whether it's a feral swarm that you've captured. So we want to get that information. So what's next? It's really relying on that New South Wales response plan getting approved. We'll start rolling out education and training for industry, especially on integrated pest management. Interstate movement and trade is going to remain a major priority for us. We need to get that sensible movement of hives happening again. We know if we don't create legitimate pathways, people will resort to illegal ones. So we need to make sure we've got that. We want to increase our mite tracking ability. We want to really increase the usage of B123, and we want to turn that into something that benefits industry. We don't want that just being negative data that people look at once and don't look at again. That can create heat mapping like New South Wales has got. This is where Queensland beekeepers can be making informed decisions based on mite population out there in Queensland. Look, queen bees need a whole heap of work, pollination security, and we just got to identify what the Queensland specific problems are. So we've got some research gaps. That'll be part of what our program, our expanded varroa mite prevention preparedness program is going to be seeking to do in our next iteration post 30 June. So I'm sorry I rushed the last bit, but I've talked way too long. I want to give you guys all an opportunity. I'm happy to hang around for a little bit longer if anyone's got any questions. By all means, we'll chuck our link in the chat. We will make sure that we're constantly updating our transition management page online. That will be your, Joe's already mentioned your QBA website is fantastic. That is a great point of truth. We hope to replicate that with our own information. We've got that New South Wales information you should be assessing as well. You can call the call centre if you've got any concerns and ask to speak to our program, or if you want to get in direct contact, varroa@daf.qld.gov.au. But I'll open it up.
Yeah, let's open it up. I know that John's just asked a question with regards to are we continuing to look for deformed wing virus? I can probably just alleviate Rob talking about that for a moment. Yes, definitely. There have been ongoing investigations and high-level auditing of mites and honeybees that have been captured within that eradication program itself. To this point in time, to date, there have been no signs or triggers for deformed wing virus. In saying that, the international example is suggesting to us that it potentially could already be here, but it's just in such low thresholds at the moment that we can't see it. But also that it only really materialised, particularly in New Zealand, within about that sort of 3 to 5 year mark is when they saw it really move through the North and the South Island. So look, we're very mindful at the moment that, you know, we're anecdotally hearing some of our colleagues in New South Wales are seeing massive mite numbers. Even, you know, they're going through and they're doing that initial observation of their surveillance to be looking within the suppression zone, within the suppression zone for varroa mite, and they're seeing quite high levels of mites. Now they're going in and knocking those mites down, you know, proceeding forward and re-monitoring again at their milestones that they're required to. These mites are popping back up again, despite the bee populations being, you know, they're a little bit unsettled, but, you know, there's no major clinical symptoms that there's issues there. But, you know, that's not going to be here to stay, and let's be confident of it. So, you know, ARBIC's very, very conscious that there is appetite to entertain, you know, investigations on improving our genetic stock and looking at varroa sensitive hygienes, you know, and that whole complement of different genetic availabilities that might be able to help us to combat varroa. But ultimately, if we have a mite that's relatively free of some of the really, really nasty diseases that it's carrying, it's that time and opportunity that we're probably best having a look at our own DNA and genetics that we've got here and carrying out those observations to really explore. There was some great work that was done 20 years ago. I acknowledge the people that are doing work at the moment as well. And I think collectively that we can use all of those sources of information to move us forward. Who knows? I think there's great potential in Australian researchers. We may very well have someone who potentially can work out the silver bullet for this thing and kill the insect living on the insect. So, you know, I really encourage science at the moment, and I'm definitely communicating. The QBA is getting a lot of calls about from researchers wanting to look at different bodies of work that they can be doing that will complement industry moving forward. John, just before I chip in to there, so I definitely can say there is no signs of DWV at the moment, but they are continuing to sample and be actively looking for it, because it is something that is on the front step of all beekeepers at the moment, knowing that when this thing pops up, she's really going to change the set of circumstances. So there's just one thing that I want to do really, really quickly, just to generate some more interest from people, hopefully. I'm going to share my screen, Rob. I'm just going to take over control for a moment. Everyone's used to me doing that. So look, for members out there, if you haven't been to the website, please go and use the QBA website. So we've got 2 websites. The website that you're looking at the moment is the Queensland Beekeepers Association public page. This is the page where you'll get access to a whole heap of information. If you've got people asking you about how do I get into beekeeping, for example's sake, and you're going, oh gosh, yep, I've got to step this through. Look, we've got some really, really great resources about beekeeping in Queensland, getting started, pest and disease, information for biosecurity officers, beekeeping clubs, how to handle bee swarms, the whole lot. There's a whole suite of information. On top of this, you can also log into the members page. So you can go here and click into the members page. Alternatively, you can go into our varroa mite portal. This is what I spoke about before. every point of information that is published by QBA that is handed to us from Biosecurity Queensland is available here. I just want to take this snapshot because I've run some diagnostics and analytics on this page. And for the volume of members that we've got and our volume of members of our affiliate clubs, people are not using this portal. And the amount of times that I'm getting requests for information that has been published some weeks ago. So please, 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 there is only one of I and 0.5 of Stephanie. Please make sure you're visiting this page as regularly as possible. The news and updates are all put on here. They're in a timeline of events that you can go in there. I make sure that I incorporate our updates with Biosecurity Queensland and the ARBIC updates. They're all there. You can go through, sorry to flick through so fast. There are pages and pages and pages. If you want to sit down and reflect on every painful moment of this exercise since that original detection was made, you have got the flexibility to do so. There's also links to all of the main bodies that we need to be well informed about. There's access to our social media pages that have got ongoing content that's being published. There's useful resources, links into professional beekeepers. There's great articles there, the Be Aware website, and then there's a whole suite of educational videos. Please do not forget, I also publish all of these videos over to the QBA's website as well. So make sure you're visiting there. If you're a member of a club at all or member of the QBA, if you click into our events section, Stephanie has done a tremendous job. I have asked her to go about contacting every club in Queensland that is a member of the organisation to access their calendar of events. Every day that Steph is getting those emails, she is punching this information in. So, this is a point of access for you. We've got, the QBA branches that are coming forward and letting us know their meeting schedules and the workshops of some of the clubs and their club meetings. So please, if you're a club, send that through, that information. It doesn't just help us, it helps everyone more broadly. So, and for us, it's about accessible information. Sorry, so I'm just going to stop sharing there. Rick, you've got a question for me. And then I'll go back to John, sorry.
Sorry,
You there,
Joe,
Rick?
did I put
sorry.
up my hand?
Yeah, you had your hand up. No?
Where?
It's an old hand.
I thought it was up for a moment. Look, Rick, you'll have to excuse me, mate. It's at the end of the day. I'm doing this in my own
You're
time,
right.
and I started work at 6:30 this morning. So it's been a heck of a day. John, yeah, your microphone's yours.
Well, you've answered the question. It was just, to my mind, the deformed wing as a Brit.
Yeah.
We complain all the time. But anyway.
You said it, mate. You said it.
What was I going to say?
But to my mind, the varroa is one thing. Varroa plus,
Yeah.
deformed wing virus is it's difficult to believe that this could be exponentially worse.
Oh, yeah.
But it can be. Rob would know. It can be exponentially worse. And
add small hive beetle to that mix, and we don't know what we're going to get in Queensland.
And that's where, to a point, I have, from a British point of view, we don't have small hive beetle, but I do have experience in Canada where we have small hive beetle, varroa, and deformed wing. But we have then the winter. So I have 4 months or 3 months when I don't have brood. Although we do have rain, although in Townsville we may have a lot of rain.
Yes, very soon.
I'll be able to get home. But we do have rain, and when it rains, we do actually have a period of time where and that sort of weather event may well become integral part of our IPM.
Yes.
But from the deformed wing virus, what I wanted to put out there was I really would like some fact sheets, pictures, because they are obvious. They look like crippled.
Yeah.
The one thing, you might not see the varroa, but you see the wings.
You should.
But to my mind, Australia is free of deformed wing virus. Although I would agree with Joe that I have not really seen good science that says we're free to my mind means zero. And I suspect we may not be free. We may just have it at a very low level because there's nothing that transmits it.
Yeah.
But we introduce the hypodermic needle that wanders around and injects all the bees. Well, then deformed wing virus unfortunately could come about. So all I'm saying is that to beekeepers in Australia, but beekeepers in Queensland. Deformed wing virus is another red flag. You see something now. There's K wings, which are a little different, but you see a bee with deformed wing virus, and there can be genetics that cause this.
Yeah.
You see a bee with deformed wing virus. I'm encouraging everybody to phone the department, take a photograph, put the bee
Report.
Well, what I would do is use some good Glenmorangie. I mean, you want a good whiskey, not just a cheap whiskey. Put the bee in something and then get it to somebody.
And we'll have more to say on this once the response plan is approved, but it is a component of the response plan. There will be ongoing testing both in managed hives and the wild honeybee population in New South Wales on exactly that point. So it is a major part of the plan, the response planning. We'll get more information on that as time goes by, but that also highlights the point why we don't want to jump the gun, and a lot of people are keen to just introduce genetics from countries that already have varroa, but that's why you don't want to do it. We don't want to introduce something that we don't have yet. By all means, we probably do have it running, and until you introduce that vector and the bees transmitting it, we're confident you're not even going to see colony collapse in New South Wales for a period of time. Queensland, hopefully that day is 3 to 5 years away, but look, we just don't know those interactions and what virus loading we have. That's going to be the National Bee Pest Surveillance Program is going to have to shift in focus to be looking at viruses coming in on new introductions, because all the ports are going to have endemic varroa at some point. So we need to change the way we do things. There's a lot of uplift will be going as part of the program with the various labs around the country. Up until now, a lot of that work has to be done through CSIRO.
Yes.
One of the legacy items out of this program, you'll see each of the jurisdictions will have that capacity that they will be able to do virus testing, and it will happen a lot faster. So
I think something is it just is having some perspective on this entire situation as well. I think for everyone, getting the news here at a senior level in the QBA, it was a kick in the guts that we detected varroa. Furthermore, then the 19th of September is a day that'll last in my mind for a long time, knowing that that decision to transition to management was imminent and it was going to be broadcast, and it was sickening, to be honest. There was a lot of people that put in a lot of effort, and credit to a lot of our QBA members that went down, sacrificed time away from family, sacrificed time away from their bees and their businesses, and that they went and fronted up on the front lines in the battleground. So my thanks to those guys. Your time wasn't in vain. Your contributions, I think you're all better beekeepers for that experience. But moving forward, I think what we've got to start doing now is, adopting those new regimes. The operational aspect in our apiaries, making sure that we're undertaking, those varroa mite surveillances. And I'm going to just put it out here more broadly. If you're a commercial beekeeper and you're servicing a lot of loads at the moment, if it's a means for you to get around quickly and efficiently to be surveying those loads and getting through the populations that you need to use, couple of 10-litre buckets filled up with methylated spirits. This is only just to do high level, very, very efficient alcohol washing, but capturing a sample from a couple of boxes at a time, taking that back to the shed then, and when you've got some downtime, when it's a bit cooler, you can go through and strain through all of those. There's another more efficient way. That's not going to be a practical way of doing things once varroa is here. Let me be clear. You will want to be more precise and more accurate, but for the reason just to get in and get it done. Some of the big operations are doing that at the moment, and these guys, thank you. You're reporting your information, so it's a huge help.
And there are videos online of that process with Rod Burke, New South Wales Bee Biosecurity Officer, shows you that exact process.
Absolutely. So, but to sort of, wrap around while everyone's just sort of thinking about some more questions, I hope, this isn't going to be our last incursion of an exotic pest or, a disease on the shoreline of Australia. There are still many other instances. For me, someone recently interviewed me for a piece for a German newspaper, believe it or not. And they asked me what's still keeping me awake at night. And I made it very clear to them that it was, that ongoing challenge that our beekeepers are moving towards varroa mite, and we might not necessarily be looking for things like tropicolaps mites. Queensland's the #1 destination for exotic pest and disease incursions in the country. We have a reputation for being challenged by natural disasters as the one, imminently unfolding. I'm sure I'm going to be in a meeting tomorrow morning with the Agricultural Disaster Task Force. But, moving forward, there is still so much more on the horizon. So don't take your eyes away from the prize at the moment. Please be mindful that we need to be continuing to look for these inconsistencies and irregularities. It's so important. We're turning the chapter in a new page in beekeeping, and we need to be mindful that we're still absorbing what we need to, but being mindful that there are other threats on the horizon as well. So I don't want to scare to people too much, but, please do what you've got the means to do at the moment. And I think everyone has got the means for it. I've been around the industry for a very long time before I even became the state secretary, and beekeepers, they are the lifeblood of, I think, they're they're the beating heart of agriculture. Who else would turn up and get stung by insects every day? And to keep moving forward. But I appreciate that in these situations, it's easy to dig your head in the sand and think that the old bloke up the road's going to be actively testing. It'll be right. He'll be doing his testing and reporting it. Well, to be very blunt, he's not doing it. Then no one's doing it. 4% of beekeepers are testing in Queensland and putting their results forward. So please, get your data in. It gives me ammunition that when the call is made, and we've got to come in and provide practical consultation to the department, that we've got the data to make informed decisions as your industry body, and really advocate in your best interest. But if we don't have great visibility on surveillance numbers, it makes it very, very difficult, and it does compromise people's ability to move forward. So, Rick, again, I say, yes, mate, I've been waiting to rip the Band-Aid off. I made an assumption that we would have it here before December last year. I was wrong. Now I wait for the phone call every single day, and on bated breath. I'm anticipating the phone call, but we're never going to get there if we're not finding it. And to take a book out of a Statesman of Industry's page, you want to be looking for it now before it's too late. It's too late when you see huge populations sitting in the bottom of an alcohol wash kit, and then you've got to start struggling with, particularly a small hive beetle infestation plague, to try and get on top of this thing. So be on the front foot, be a beekeeper, and in his words, don't be a bee haver. I'll open up for one last question. That was the end of my TED talk. Is there any other questions at all? I've got still plenty of people online. If you're wanting to throw a question out there, the platform's yours.
And look, if you don't want to do it here, just by all means, give us an email on that Varroa email address, call the call centre, speak to one of our team. We are available for any questions you have.
Absolutely. No, I think that's it. I think, look, everyone's probably feeling a little fatigued at the moment. I know my voice is getting cranky because I've been worrying about varroa and an imminent cyclone and weather system ahead at the moment. So, trying to coordinate activities to get information messaging out so people are securing their hives and preparing. Please don't put umbrellas over your hives, but you're my great beekeepers. You know not to do that. So, John,
thanks very much for organising this, Joe. And we will try and do this again. Once this response plan is approved, we'll have more information to share.
Absolutely. We will get this information out there. But please tell your colleagues in industry, dial in, use these opportunities. The QBA board does assess the engagement of our members in these, and they are truly looking at whether this is an effective use of my time to be able to put this together. So please use the opportunity to interact with us. My phone's always on for QBA members. Message me day or night. I am here to help and support you. All right. Team, thank you so much. John, you look like you're in an airport, buddy. So, no, or a shopping centre getting supplies for the cyclone. So, anyway, all our best to our beekeepers up north. Lock down, stay tight. Stay inside. Make sure that it's no good.
Yes.
Don't go outside and check like stupid people do. But yeah, please, take provisions now, and all our best to everyone up north, and we'll see you through the other side.
Awesome. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.